Welcome, everyone. My guest today is Lead Analyst Logan Mohtashami to talk about the jobs data that could get us lower mortgage rates, if only we had it. First, I want to thank our sponsor, Trust and Will, for making this episode possible. Logan, welcome back to the podcast.
Sarah, we have like breaking news.
Okay.
Beth Hammack just made a statement that she's concerned about the labor market.
Oh, okay. This is good.
I don't believe her. I do not believe her one bit. This is the Cleveland Fed president who we have picked on for many, many months now, who literally weeks ago said the labor market is robust. There's some maybe little strains to the labor market I'm concerned about the labor market. If you are the Cleveland Fed president and you have aggregate data that we all as analysts are looking at, and you go from, it's bad enough that Powell did it, but if you went from robust to it's not that much of a concern, maybe there's small stuff to, okay, now I'm concerned within a very small amount of time, something is wrong with your model. This is why I always say that. I always want people's forecast, but I want their model to figure out where they're going. And within a span of just weeks, we went from robust to I'm concerned. I don't believe it. I think she's just gotten a lot of feedback on, hey, listen, you keep on saying this. It doesn't look good to the American public. She's got a Wall Street background, so I know how that is with on inflation over labor sometimes. So in this context, she came out today. I have labor concerns. I literally put Anchorman's gif where he goes, "I don't believe you," out there. So that was shocking, but don't buy it.
Okay, well, this speaks to the larger issue that we're all finding out this week is that even when the government is open, I guess it's officially open now, we will not see October labor data, apparently. Explain this one to me because I don't really understand what's going on.
One of my counterparts in London, well-known economist, said, I could tell you what happened in England in 1840 in May with the jobs report, and we can't figure out what happened in October. So the first response that a lot of people said to me, doesn't Trump want lower rates? If the report is bad, won't that help him out? Because all he wants is lower rates. And you and I had this conversation as well recently, but I look at it in this standpoint. I'm not here trying to justify it. I'm just telling you that this is maybe a hypothesis on why this is not happening. Maybe there's some logistic issues. Okay, just let's take the logistic issues out of the side for a little bit. The president most likely is about to lose his tariffs to the Supreme Court. The polling isn't as good because affordability issues with stuff, right? Goods inflation has been rising, so there's ticket items that are rising in costs. And now the labor data is not showing much growth. In some reports are negative. At this period of time, he's got to defend the tariffs because if the Supreme Court goes against them and then he tries some other thing to do it, it gets a harder sell when you come out and say if Goldman Sachs is right, and Goldman Sachs said, we're going to have 50,000 jobs lost in October. And then the growth rate of inflation is not at 2%. I believe if there was a trying to figure this out, why does he just not show it? Because rates will go lower. It's because there's a lot of things going on right now. And these kind of headlines with trying to fight for the tariffs, not the best backdrop at this current moment. And again, we have a lot of noise, right? We're throwing $2,000 checks at people. We're doing 50-year mortgages. We're saying that if you take the tariffs back, it's going to cost us $3 trillion. So there's a lot going on here. There's always a lot going on anyway, but if you're trying to make sense of it all with the mindset that why does he just show the reports? If it's bad jobs, rates will go down. There are other things that are happening at this very moment that is a little bit different than, let's say, this happened 6 months ago.
Right. So what you're saying, he doesn't want the bad press of like, oh, jobs are, you're losing jobs under Trump, are losing jobs, even though that would actually be better. I mean, that gives the Federal Reserve the justification they need to lower rates. It really gets him what he wants.
Let me tell you what the Federal Reserve would think about something like this. Let's say, I'm pretty sure the Federal Reserve doesn't take the $2,000 check seriously unless it's actually sent out. But if you are still in a tariff world and you send checks to people, and especially the lower income bracket, that's a noticeable chunk of money. They would say that just keeps inflation firmer in
It's a
this regard.
stimulus, right?
Yeah, I
It's a
mean,
stimulus for the
the
economy.
velocity of it is really big, right? When rates go up and down, the velocity of rates are to a certain kind of income bracket. But if you send checks to people, you know, that's money that they're going to use. And the higher the income bracket, the less propensity to spend, because I mean you have so much spare capacity and you're spending like you want. But on the lower income side, yeah, that's noticeable. So um, I'm sure the Fed is like, that's the last thing they want to deal with. But when you have a little bit of turmoil, right? Well, you got a government shutdown, some of the pollings isn't good, you know, people are complaining about affordability, and then all of a sudden the jobs data is getting weaker. There's just a lot here. So what do you checks? Let's just throw checks to people, right? Because the tariff is really his. Trump just loves tariff more than anything because he likes New York bully ball. And if he can't bully other countries unless he can do tariff. So if you take that away from him, you know, especially this is his last, presidency, it might not be as fun anymore, So there's just a lot of noise out here, and whenever government says we'll give you checks and we'll do this with mortgages and stuff like this, there's a backdrop story. So for those that are asking, why doesn't he just show the report? If it is bad, it gets lower rates. I think that the tariff thing is getting a lot of his attention right now.
I think if you cared about housing, right? Like for everyone in housing, we're like, show it, get us the lower rates. Let's do it. Let's get this ball rolling. But you're talking about the political considerations on top of that.
Political economic theory, I hate it.
I
I
know you
just
do.
it's just I tell you, it's just one of the beauties of my life is I try to avoid people as much as possible, which is kind of crazy because I deal with Jackass Men on X and like others in YouTube comment sections. But there's a lot of noise and there's a lot of ideological advantages for political consideration. So it's politics. It's like the word politics, many blood-sucking parasites. So you do it to try to gain as much voting things or try to move a policy agenda. This gets into a really murky world with economics. So I have to talk about it. I'd rather not, but this is my interpretation of maybe not wanting to show the reports, or there's just the logistics. They just literally don't have the people. But between the shutdown and the Supreme Court and the pollings, you could see kind of what's going on because the labor data is getting softer, right? This is a noticeable, and also there's starting to become more of a discussion about, what's this story about this labor force growth? I mean, are we really going to be a very low job creation economy for the next 100 years? I mean, is this true? Do we just not have enough? So presidents come and go. Economic cycles are here 24/7. We lived through very crazy times for the last 200 years, but there's a lot happening at this very moment. So kind of take that into consideration more than maybe a traditional economic take right now that, hey, let him show the reports. If they're weaker, rates go down. That's what he wants, right? So it's a little bit Bosch painting out there right now.
I would agree with that 100%. Okay, well, what other data are you looking at this week?
There's not much. I mean, they're really, you know, I mean, not having the inflation report, not having the retail sales, you know, we have our own data lines. We look at tax receipts from the IRS on the weekly side. We look at other private sector data to see what's going on. And to me, it's just things are holding up. but I would tell you this on this is a good one of the reports that did come out this week. The Small Business Confidence Index came out. Very, very pro Trump, very conservative. I mean, when Trump wins the presidency, this thing goes vertical. I mean, you've never seen a bunch of happy guys except for, maybe if your team won the Super Bowl. So, with that context, some people are saying, well, the Small Business Index is saying that they have a hard time finding labor. And then if you look at the same report, they're not really, they have no plans to raise wages. If you really had like a problem hiring, needing labor, you would raise wages to compete for labor. I wonder if the small business community is thinking, where did our labor go?
Mhm.
Population growth slowing down is one thing, but just imagine if less immigration and kicking people out, there are probably sectors of the economy in certain states where it's a little bit harder maybe to find work or find labor. So that's an interesting report, and that's something that we can think about this year, next year, and going out for 10 years. Is the labor force growth story really legit where we can't have big reports? And how does the small business community look at this? Because if their confidence isn't really booming anymore and they're saying that we can't find labor, but they're not raising wages, it's just something to think about. That's one of the data lines this week that we did get that, it did make me ponder that question about what do they really think at this stage.
You've done a lot of demographic work. It's central to what you do. And you've always said, we're in a better spot than a lot of other countries because we have a younger labor force. What is this, that obviously hasn't changed in the last little bit, but the immigration part has changed maybe. So how do you look at us and our labor force going forward in the next 20 years right now?
We have an unbelievable advantage because we have millennials and Gen Z. And like I've always said at many events, for again, Sarah, you didn't know me in the last decade. You did reject me for the award, but in the last decade, I always said the millennials and Gen Z are bigger than the total population of Japan, and 40% of Japan's population will be dead by the end of the century, and they sell more adult diapers than baby diapers. So economics is demographics and productivity. The rest is stamp collecting. That's the basic foundation of economics. Your demographics and how productive your people are. There are sectors of the economy that have very poor productivity. Construction. If you look at the saddest chart I have in America is if you take the productivity growth of subsectors in America going back to 1950, uh, adjusted to time, the construction is so negative. I mean, it is just it's an abomination.
Yeah.
But productivity can help an economy grow and become more efficient. So if we are losing some of our labor force growth, then we better get productive to offset it, or else small business might be complaining about labor but not raising wages to get it. Connect the dots there. So we always will have an advantage over other countries. Like China's worse than us, Japan's worse than us, Europe's worse than us. So this is our century. India becomes a very interesting country going out for the next 50 to 70 years. They have a lot of potential because so much of the population is younger, but mother demographics takes us all at the end, right? China, their prime age population growth peaked in 2015. Japan was in the late 1990s. This doesn't mean that your economy is going to blow up and be terrible, but there's limits to what you can do with your labor force. The fact that Japan has finally accepted immigration shows how bad that situation is for a country and a civilization that has really despised immigration more than other places. But what's the saying we have here, Sarah? No country has a Dorian Gray labor market, right? We
Right.
all age, nature wins, we leave the workforce and we die, right? And in death and in retirement, that workforce needs to be replaced. And in parts of the country where demand is picking up, If you have an aging workforce and you're replacing them to a degree and you need more labor, you got to get those people to come in there. And, that's a lot of states want labor. You and I, when we went to speak in New Hampshire, right? And
Yep.
they needed doctors and nurses and people to come in there and kind of get the labor force growing there. I mean, there are restaurants that couldn't open until certain times because they don't have enough. So it is such a key factor to my work, and I've always said that that's always been our advantage. But if it is true that this huge labor force growth that we've had through immigration and stuff, if that's going to start to close down, that's something to think about in the future for sure. But here, boy, we millennials, Gen Z, that gives us such an advantage over other countries. We have replacement workers and replacement consumers. This doesn't mean that our population growth is booming, but it's still growing. But it is something to think about over the next 20 to 30 years.
So one of the things that's tricky about immigration, I think, when you're looking at population is that it's not only the people who are coming in, so those raw numbers, but the fact that people who are coming in a lot of times have more children on average than people who have been here for a while. It's just the way things go. And so if you have the immigration slowing down for other reasons or being blocked for other reasons, you also have less people being born here, correct?
As a country, we're having less and less kids. And if you look at the history of global economics, a country that gets wealthier has less children. And if you even look at Africa, they are starting to have less and less kids out there. So it is just a natural progression of an economy that grows and has more wealth tends to have less children. I mean, a lot of this, 150 years ago, people needed big families for farming and stuff like that, and you just don't need them anymore out there. Productivity has changed agriculture in a big way. But in general terms, we're having less and less kids out there. So we're getting married a little bit later in life. It's a little bit much different than the post World War II baby boom, where you get married very young, you have kids very young, and you move on. Everything gets pushed out in the curve of age, especially the marriage data. The marriage data is something I've showed those charts for 10 years, and this that's so much of housing economics out there. People renting, dating, having sex, getting married, having kids, and then dual household incomes, and usually it's in the 30 to 35. By the way, there's a lot of people now that are figuring out that the NAR's survey data is a little bit
I was going to
suspect.
say we might need to revisit that
Yeah,
in this
it's
conversation.
when I started, I could tell you this, when I started sharing them, like how they track the data, and everyone's like, what? Wait a second, really? And I said, yeah. And I said, well, this explains this. And now I'm
Oh,
seeing
okay, well, like do just a very short explanation of what you're talking about right now.
so the NAR comes out with this yearly survey, and they basically said first time home buyers are age 40 and the first time home buyer percentage is 21. So I've kind of just, I know this survey is wrong compared to the data, but you know, this was a little bit more of an egregious look at it. So what I did is I just actually shared the NAR's methodology, how they do it, how they track this. And it's 173,000 people take the survey. It's 120 questions. Lord, if you give me 12 questions of the survey, I'm not answering it. Okay, so 120, I'm sorry. Um, could you
That
imagine?
is rough.
Could
That
you
is
imagine
rough.
young people that can maybe watch Selling Sunset for like 3 minutes and then move on to something else on YouTube, and you're asking younger people to fill out 120? Come on now. In any case, it had a 3.5% response rate. It's like 6,000 people. And I could see baby boomers who have nothing to do just go, I'm going to fill this out. They get really excited, they wait for their bingo game. But here, I think then all of a sudden, people are like, whoa, it was such a surprise reaction to it that everyone started to, now I see this everywhere, that people are like, wait a second, the New York Fed has tracked this for a long time, and they say the age is like this and this. And, so my concern was that if rates went down and mortgage demand picked up, because first time home buyers finance, then that age falls down, noticeably, and that's not correct either. So it's been a big part of my work that, we do things a little bit later, but the 21% first time home buyer percentage, and then to have like the monthly reports show 29, 30, 31%, something's wrong there. You can't have your entire year be 10% higher on a monthly basis versus a survey. So why is a survey wrong? I can tell you why it's wrong. It's how they're account. Sarah, you know this about me. I'm not a big fan of surveys. I mean, I've seen this
You
one.
don't like surveys.
I've seen this one survey for like 15 years. Nobody has $400 in their checking account, and we're all broke. And I just, it is one of the most. It's such an abomination that some of these surveys that get a lot of play, and like the sample size is so small, and you just like so. Um, just I urge everyone, take surveys with a grain of salt, but I know nobody likes to read. Go read how they actually take it. Like read the sample size, read it, and then maybe it makes sense. Hard data, like credit data, we like, right? Because credit data
Right.
encapsulates everything that's out there. And
Okay, so what's the Fed first time homebuyer rate? If it's not 40, what
I
has
mean,
it been
it's been like
consistently for the
30 to
last?
35 for the whole century. It's actually gone a little bit lower over the recent time. So, and if you actually track the demographic profile of first-time homebuyers and what they do when they get married, and that makes a little bit more sense to me. I mean, that was my whole thing in the last decade. We do things a lot in the 30s now, where we used to do it in the 20s. But it like this jump to 40, and then the 21% on a survey with 6,000 people, Sarah. So many baby boomers probably filled that out. So I'm just a little bit suspect, but I'm glad to see that that conversation is happening, right? Because we
Right.
okay, knowledge is power. Reading is a good thing. Clearly, nobody has ever read this survey and how they track it for a long time. Very few people talk about it. So I just never really paid much attention to. But that moving that survey, that first time homebuyer percentage down to 21%, and then every doomer in the world saying that. But then it's like the last 3 months were like 30%. So I just try to bring a little bit of perspective in that. So for the first time, I actually got involved in this discussion and said, come on now. And just one other survey thing in housing, they came out with a survey that said that there's an additional $16,000 to $17,000 cost to be a homeowner, but it's like near $11,000 of maintenance a year. And everybody was like, "What?" And I was like, "Listen, guys, if you had a gremlin in your house living with you, and all the times that you got your house damaged, and with the cost of everything, yeah, you would spend $11,000 on maintenance." I was like, 11K, survey.
That's a lot.
Yeah. I mean, even when the doomers are saying, "Hey, that doesn't sound right," just kind of remember the surveys get a lot of play these days. Kind of like get in there and read how they do it, and just take all surveys with a grain of salt. It's a good thing. Grain of salt economics is something we should all embrace.
Oh my gosh, we're about to see merch on grain of salt economics. It's gonna happen. Now I know. Logan, as always, thank you so much for being with us, and we will talk again soon.
Pleasure, Sarah.